You're tuned into the Unnecessary Harm podcast, where we drill down on issues of substance use and its cultural impact. Your host, Shaun Varcoe, Executive Director of the Dalgarno Institute, with over 40 years experience in youth and community work and a passion for building resilience.
Welcome back to the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Great to have you back with us, and if you're tuning in for the first time, welcome on board, and thank you for the ongoing subscription. It's good to see. Today's guest discovered his calling through personal transformation. His journey took him from struggling with alcohol and feeling lost in an overseas context to founding Self-Built Health. It's a movement helping hundreds of people transform their lives through resilience and holistic wellness. As a qualified health scientist, life coach, and World Resiliency Day ambassador, he's discovered that real change comes not from running away from discomfort, but from facing it head-on with the right tools and, of course, the right supports. Very important. Shaun Tucker, welcome to the Unnecessary Harm podcast, sir.
Shane, thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure, and I love the work that you guys do. Thank you for letting me be and speak.
Back at you. Back at you. Look, many people are clearly already aware of your work. You've got a fairly solid online presence, and your work is engaged with by a wide and various cohort, which is fantastic. So, but they're kind of acquainted with the work. But what we'd like to do to sort of initiate the conversation today is talk a little bit about the evolution into the space that you're in now, and kind of tell us some of the catalysts about what sparked this. Obviously, overseas alcohol's involved. What were some of the elements, if you can, go as personal and as deep as you like, or as shallow as you like. It's all in your hands, my friend. But yeah, just give us a bit of background, and how did substance use in various kinds figure into that process?
Yeah, great place to start. I mean, I did have a rude awakening experience, and I think if I moved back 15 years ago when it happened, it was at a time where I was pretty purposeless, I'd say. Didn't know what was going on. I'm from a big family. I've got 4 brothers and 1 sister, and obviously my parents they're still together now. So really, really big family. And being a middle child, I think, or even just one of the younger ones, you sort of just follow in your older brother's footsteps. So I've got 3 older brothers, and I didn't really find my place of belonging, I guess. And for me, I was always putting others' needs before my own. And I guess I got to a point where alcohol became a norm. And when I was 17, 18 is probably when I started really drinking, when, you turn 18 and of course, you're legally allowed to drink. Things sort of got out of hand when I would hit the booze, right? So it'd become a means to relax and unwind.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a regular thing, but it was more that binge drinking culture where you do it on the weekend. You go to a party and you just go nuts on seeing how much you could drink and still be somewhat tolerable. And I had this experience.
Good word, tolerable. Yeah, keep going, sorry.
Had this experience overseas where alcohol is dirt cheap. And, we were in South Korea. I was with my brother, with a good friend. We were clubbing. We were spending, I think, 4 nights there away from being in Japan, because my brothers were actually studying in Japan and we were there visiting them. And so it's a pretty short flight over to Korea. So we're like, let's go in the middle of winter and have a good old time and just go out clubbing and drink lots of alcohol. And we ended up buying just enormous amounts before going clubbing. And then we met another Aussie guy who just absolutely loves the piss. He absolutely loves getting on the beers and getting on the alcohol.
Yeah. So you preloaded. You were preloading.
Pretty much. This guy that we met over there, he was like a FIFO worker working in Laos or somewhere in the mines somewhere in Southeast Asia. And he'd just travel and just get wasted. He'd just get constantly wasted. And he met us, and this guy was loaded, man. Like he was loaded. He had like cash strapped, like thousands of dollars of cash strapped to his ankle. in case of emergencies type thing.
Seriously.
And, you know, what a man to meet on a trip where we were budget strapped, right? So we were having lots of fun.
Yeah. Free ride, come on.
Pretty much. So 3 consecutive nights of going out. The 4th night, we were supposed to go back the next day, back onto the flight back to Japan. And we got into the club, freezing, mind you, in Korea at that time of the year. It's like, I don't know, -10, -15 degrees. And apparently we just started going through the cocktail list that they had serving at the club. Not only that, but me and my friend that I went over from Australia, we were staying as housemates. We went out to a 7-Eleven and for some reason bought a cigar and brought it back into the club and started smoking a cigar. And that's all I really remember. Apparently we just went through this cocktail list, and one point in the night, I just blacked out. But the stories that I've heard back since have been the security guards and people just got these mountains of toilet paper and just like threw it on this puddle of spew that was just projectiling out of me. And I woke up the next morning never having felt so sick in all my life. Yeah. And I had blood on my hands. I had blood on my face, so I must have had some sort of blood nose or something. I was just completely disoriented, and then we had to make a trek back to Japan. And I made a decision sort of in the next 24 to 48 hours that I never wanted to feel that way ever again. Because I realized that I was merely just following what society said. Yeah, you got permission to go and do this now. You can do whatever you want, really, as long as it doesn't break any laws.
Yeah, well.
And I remember the next number of days just laying in the hotel. My family was there. My sister was there. My 3 brothers at the time were in Japan. They were sort of like having a little family holiday. And I was just sick and just feeling absolutely awful, stuck in a hotel room, just sleeping it off, basically.
Yeah.
I was like, something's got to change, because this is a point in my life where I was quite fat. Like, I was very, very low self-esteem, had a lot of body image issues in myself, right, and just really lost on my path. Yeah. And so that was it. I got back to Australia and I was like, all right, I'm going to start working on myself. And what every fat kid does is they start running. They start running, because this is when I was 19.
There's a movie about that somewhere. Simon Pegg, sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Just started running, and then one thing led to another. Started getting involved in the gym, and the gym started becoming a place where I could build myself up. And then wanted to show other people how to do it, so I became a personal trainer. Gym shut down, business closed down. What do? I didn't pivot.
Okay.
And then I realized, wow, there's so much more to transformation and personal well-being than just the physical aspects of like getting in the gym and doing a hard workout.
Yeah. Before we jump into that space, I think that's a really good starter point. Thanks for that. And look, the journey you've experienced, everyone's experience in this space is completely unique in its own context. We understand that. But the genre of experience that you had is common. That sense of just partying is because it's almost it's a faux hedonism, because it really isn't just about pleasure seeking. There's a degree of, as you said, perhaps low-level self-medication in the sense of trying to deal with your sense of identity, lack of purposelessness, purposefulness, your image, which is informed much by the culture. And of course you jumped into as the culture would dictate, you want to get better, you want to improve, and you go to the image improving context, which is nothing wrong with that, but you go to the gym and you go to the place where you make yourself look better. Your externals are the first priority, because that often is what the culture places value on. Well, whether it's stated or subtly or subliminally inserted into the culture, it's very real. So the sense of who I am, my identity, am I valuable? Am I seen? Am I valuable? Have I worth? And all those things are unfortunately now very, very pop culture driven Western digital age is very much image focused. So of course that makes sense to do that. But it's interesting that your family life, and I might explore this a little bit, it wasn't traumatic in such, but it was that sense of big family, as families are. I think an indication from you is that mum and dad were pretty solid, your brothers and sisters were okay, there was no abuse, there was no neglect, there was no violence, there was no inappropriate behaviours. Oh, sure, I'm assuming the family drank, maybe to excess on the occasion, but there was nothing what would be considered a traumatic series of events that drove this, was there?
No, absolutely not. And even still, my dad doesn't really drink. He used to like having a light beer after a hard day's work. That was it. He would stop at one.
Sure.
One and done.
Yeah. So it's not a narrative that you're immersed in, which is great. But again, I want to just, to the listeners that are here, particularly the younger ones that are chiming in, the drivers behind this. And I had a similar experience as a teenager, and that's the difficulty. Starting drinking when you're 16, 17 is not helpful for a whole bunch of socio-biological reasons. But it's interesting that experience is quite common. But that moment of complete catastrophic contact with unwellness, and that's what it's not just, oh man, you got wasted, oh man, you're out of it for a couple of days, man. No, this was really quite catastrophic, and I've had a similar experience, Shaun. I'm not going to go into that today, but that was also a turning point for me. It's like, wow, okay, this can get really bad. For some people, it doesn't shift them. It actually they just double down, which is really sad. But no, thanks for that. I appreciate that. And of course, we're going to start talking about the wellness side of things, because we are more than the biological bag of muscles and our facade. Obviously, a lot more going on than that. But was there any other substances come into your world that, during that time or later on that was kind of introduced as an option? Because we're seeing a lot of people now, the old California sober joke that used to be big in the 80s and 90s is now starting to land more culturally everywhere else. Oh, young people are drinking less, but they're doing weed more, So it's kind of swapping one toxin for another, in fact, a worse one in some contexts. In other ones it's not, but in other contexts it's incredibly bad. And did that enter into your world at all at any significant level?
It certainly has. I mean, when I'd say a lot later, was definitely not in my teens. It was probably mid-20s for me. Right. And that was probably something that started as a time passer. We're not talking really, really hard drugs or anything like that, but more just talking what people would call wacky tobacco, right? And these things, people have to understand that they're highly addictive. And when you're trying to pass time, right, it's an interesting void, because it's just a coping mechanism. It's literally just a coping mechanism. What are you really running away from? That's what I had to really open up my eyes and have a look at, because I haven't touched. I'm not drinking. I don't touch any drugs. I barely touch any pain sedatives. I challenge myself daily to really make myself uncomfortable, because that's where growth happens. And we live in a culture now. Yep.
No, we'll jump on that. Just jump on that before we get into that, because I think that's important, and I love that aspect of what you try and inculcate in your sessions with people in development, and it is a genuine and effective tool that has often been forgotten or just recently, in the last probably decade, taken out of the toolkit because of a number of factors, which I'll talk about later on. But that wellness thing, and then just getting back to passing the time, and of course, purposelessness, it creates a vacuum, and the vacuum needs to be filled, because nature abhors a vacuum, the old cliche, but it's true. So what happens is I want to pass the time, and I want to do it pleasurably. And comfort, a culture that we live in, it just adores, worships almost comfort, particularly in the first world West. So we engage with things that are going to make us feel comfortable. But now with the before we go into the mechanism that you're kind of developing, the wholeness and the well-being dynamic, just walk us through some of the key aspects of that in your life. Obviously purpose is part of that, and physical fitness, but what are some of the key aspects that you find have sort of coalesced around a really healthy, helpful way? Because obviously substances are outside of that arena, which is fantastic, because we all know substance use of any kind, legal or illicit, is ultimately not helpful to the human biological unit, or the psychological aspect of that human unit as well. We all know that, the short-term gains, long-term pain. So we know that that's the case. But for you, what are some of the key markers and the key developmental aspects of that?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting that I've had to kind of look at really quite deeply, and only have kind of realized in the last probably 6 years or so, is that everyone's addicted to something, right? Everyone has an addiction, because addiction itself is not, the word itself has a quite derogatory kind of form or meaning to it. But when you actually look at the real meaning of it, it's a cycle. It's something that needs to happen for you to get to a point where you're not uncomfortable, right? That's kind of what it is, and it's almost like it needs to happen for your routine, for you to be in alignment with what's happening outside of you or inside of you. And so I was pretty addicted to gaming. I was as a teenager, and probably even younger, as a younger kid. We played sports as well. Like, people get addicted to sports, right? And I think it's just it's an evolution. And as you kind of get older and get more curious as to like what's really, really happening, not in society, but just as life as a whole, you kind of like, you open your eyes and you start to question. And this is where I think permission pieces from people around you can be quite dangerous when we're talking about substances, and whether they're illicit or legal, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. It's normalizing. I think that's where it becomes quite problematic. It's like if you went on the internet and went to one of the, I don't know, probably millions and millions of porn sites that there are, right? It's like, it's highly accessible, and literally like you just have to click one button and you've got full access. Like we're talking about kids who might be 6 or 7 years old, have access to the internet. They just type in one wrong address, and now they're confronted with all these images, which is really highly stimulating towards their to their base regions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're 6 or 7, it's probably not really going to happen. Probably more talking like 8, 9, 10 plus year olds, but
it will happen later on. I can
it will absolutely happen, because this is the dangers of technology.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that we, as a well-being piece, we have our own inner technology, right? Our life itself is intelligence, right? It has its own intelligence. And when you start to really understand how life works, life and death happen. They can't happen separately from one another. They happen together. And this is why I think it's so powerful to have an experience like I had, where you have that real rude awakening, as I like to call it. Yep. Because it's like you're teetering on playing with death. And most people are scared to death, right? Or scared of death. And so what I've also learned recently is, like, when you start to understand that this is part of the process, well, you can only really start to access life once you actually understand what death is. And you can't really understand what death is until you kind of experience it, right?
You bump into the realities that introduce you to the idea of its permanence. And the ending of the life, which I think is a wake-up call in its own right, Shaun. And it is because I still remember a great piece, just to digress, but a great piece from a journalist about 15 years ago. And he was talking about the misuse of alcohol. It was a big problem, the binging culture, the alco pops and all that sort of stuff. And he said, we're so enamored with alcohol. And he used a Jewish term called lachaim, which means to life. And it's a toast, and it goes with a condiment of alcohol. But he's saying instead of, it's supposed to be lachaim, to life, not instead of life. And the reality is that your experience and what you've shared, I think it's important for listeners to get this, is that when you bump into something that can extinguish a life that you have, until that point, didn't realize you were taking for granted, that this existence is more than just breathing, acting, doing. There's a whole lot more going on. And those moments of the recalibration moments that you and I have both experienced really wake you up to that there is life and there is living, and they are different to existing. And there is more going on than just, my appearance, the pleasure-seeking dynamics that can easily present themselves to us. And of course, as you said, gaming, porn, and gambling are all. We've talked on this extensively through our websites and whatnot, and through our research. Is they all basically trigger the same part of the brain, but substances will do the same thing, but they'll do it quicker. They'll do it quicker. Gaming and porn take a while. They do have an immediate impact, but substances, they will arrest very quickly. And we've talked this last time about brain, with another guest, about the cellular explosion. Anyway, I won't go into that again. But the key issue here is that substances, particularly high-level stimulants or hallucinogens, really do serious arresting, not just of the brain, but of brain cellular development. It's fascinating to watch, and it happens really quickly. And even though people can develop cognitively, their emotional development's stunted. And I think that's part of that recalibration, getting back to your journey, is that, okay, I'm emotionally stunted. I'm stuck in servicing a dysfunction or an inadequacy in a bad way, and that can no longer happen. And I'm looking now to mechanisms that'll help me be the best human person I can be and live, not just exist with pleasure timeouts from the vicissitudes of life, to quote one pro-drug activist. So this is really important. So you're developing this new perspective, new paradigm, and now you're starting to fill in the blanks with, obviously good mechanisms, including, good health management, staying away from substances, obviously, physical exercise. What are some of the other factors when it comes to the way you deal with difficulties and trauma? And trauma is a strong word we'll talk about later on, but difficulties and issues that present. What are some of the mechanisms you've found in your developmental path, in your science developmental path, Shaun?
Yeah, great question. I'd love to lean in what you just said with the emotional development side, because I think this is where many people struggle, especially, like, personally, I've struggled a lot in this space, because I know that when things became a little bit too overwhelming, because when you're talking about your when you're talking about your emotional development, you're really talking about your ability to handle and manage your nervous system. And when things became a little bit too overwhelming, when I used to receive feedback that was quite much more of a criticism than a responding to growth, in that reaction is really challenging. Yeah. So when you feel like you're being rejected or you're just not good enough, when the outside world is kind of confirming these beliefs that you hold about yourself, I'm not good enough, I was never made to fit in, etc., etc. It is really hard to manage your emotions in that sort of situation. I used to find that I would either get really mad or I would just end up in a big crying ball. And yeah, the emotional development side of me was pretty much non-existent. Yeah. It was because I felt like I probably wasn't really seen much as a child in a big family. And it wasn't that experienced any traumatic situations or anything like that. It's that internal belief system that we have about ourselves.
Yeah.
Because all self-esteem is built on those beliefs that you have around yourself. And I think it's so important to look at this because the body always keeps score. You might have really developed your intellectual capacities. You might be as wise as an old man who's sitting on a, Himalayan mountain, right? But there's no wisdom that comes from you not being able to process your emotions. You literally look like a child who's just throwing a tantrum when you get put into those sort of situations. And so memory is always kept in the body. If you have an emotional memory where it was just too much, or something where you weren't heard or you weren't able to speak what was happening, even the tiniest little thing that didn't go your way or in the way that you expected it to go,
Yep.
can actually be linked to a trauma response in the body.
Yeah.
So it might not be sort of like a PTSD, that it's in the eye of the beholder, of the person who's experienced that memory, how their body still reacts and responds now.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter if it's, to you it might seem insignificant. To me, in that moment, it was where my nervous system shut off.
Correct.
And so being able to build this resilience from the inside out is incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard because we live in a society now where it's comfort driven.
Yes,
It's comfort driven. So any signs of like being uncomfortable, it's not only comfort driven, but it's also PC driven. You got to be politically correct. You can't call people out on their bullshit anymore.
Yeah.
And so we're
There's
just
a lot of it. It's hard not to call it out.
getting that cotton
Dude,
ball.
wipe your chin. Wipe your chin.
Yeah.
Is the old saying, which has lost its impetus these days because people don't know what it means. But yeah, keep going.
100%. And it's hard because people don't know how to manage their emotions. If you look at the genders, there's differences between the genders.
Of course, yeah, and that's okay.
But let's keep it more objective. Like look at the person as a subject, objective as a whole, as an individual experience. It's very subjective, but I think it's really important to know how to actually overcome them. You have to be really present, and everyone remembers when they were kids and things become too much. What's the thing that the person of authority, if they were really present and understood what was happening, what did they tell you to do? Do you remember?
Yeah, depending on the situation.
It's probably just breathe. Just breathe.
Yeah, there was that, or there was a very strong prescriptive environment, and this is the way forward. And so there was one of the things that was difficult, but it's interesting, retroacting on experiences. It's the ability to delay gratification, the ability to control impulse is a learned behaviour. Now, if you're taught, everything's taught, every behaviour is taught, whether it's by deficit, omission or trauma, it's taught, right? Or instruction, of course, obviously positive and proactive ways of doing that. But, if someone says to me as a child, no, that's not going to happen, and my emotions are going, but I want it to happen, then my immovable force is met with an irresistible object. So what happens is something has to concede. And what happens for the psyche is it goes, well, this has actually been prohibited. So my emotions now have to follow that. But if I'm instructed in that, which I was, this behaviour is not helpful, and this is why, and we're going to end this behaviour. We're going to help extinct this behaviour because it's not helpful for you, not helpful for the family. It's not abuse, but it is an instruction, and that helps you develop stronger impulse controls. It helps you delay gratification. Now, when those are removed from the development of the child, then of course the child's going to go, have no capacity to delay gratification. I want what I want it now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, and comfort is the driver. So, yeah, I suppose for me it was, and I was a pretty wild child, mate. I was pretty adventurous, and I was running away from home at the age of 3, climbing fences, and because I couldn't get back over, and losing clothes that my parents couldn't afford, and I was just a shocker, but I won't go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, so there was lots of discipline, and it was hard, and it was fast, but I always felt loved. It was never punitive. It was always instructive, and I think that's a key issue that's perhaps been lost. But yeah, keep going. You were saying in your experience, yeah.
Yeah, I remember, and this is probably something when people find they're in an overwhelmed situation and they're shutting down.
Yeah.
Right. So they're not reacting in anger or violence or anything like that, but more just like shutting down and going inside them and into their shell. One of the things that I remember is like, just breathe and come back to your breath. Like just
good. Yep.
And just focus on that one thing, because when you're able to do that, you actually create space between your emotion and your logic. So what you think is meant to happen versus what actually happened, you can start to let your nervous system understand how to take that new perception or that new perspective.
Like a circuit breaker.
It is absolutely a circuit breaker.
Yeah.
And so this is what I found when you look at human being experience as a whole life experience, as a subjective experience. So my experience is totally different to yours.
Correct.
But you give them the tools to open up these doors in ways that are safe. Because I think one of the things that makes substance so addictive is that you get access to these doors. You get access to these doors without even having to do any work.
Correct.
And that's where it becomes quite dangerous, because you're putting on a jetpack, you're going up, all the way up, and how hard you come crushing down is not up to you. It's up to so many other aspects, like the environment that you're in, the state, your mindset that you actually drive, all of those beliefs, those values, everything comes into play in those situations. Yeah. So what I found, breath work is such a powerful mediator here, because you can create those chemical shifts by just using your breath. And you are in full control.
Yes. It's interesting. So I appreciate that. We've done a workshop with you, and it's very helpful. I actually just, interestingly enough, in the space that I've been in for a long time, I didn't really discover the importance. Obviously, breathing, I get the principle, no problems at all, but didn't discover the worth of it until about 10 years ago. And I just started doing the physiological side of it, and it actually is a very important dynamic for the entire system. We've actually talked about it as part of our Humpty Dumpty Dilemma project. It's breathing, exercising, of course, food, diet, sleep, all those, the 5 physiological sort of things we need to do along with other stuff. But you're spot on, mate. And what it does, and it's interesting, I first heard in the addiction space when I was at a conference 12, 11 years ago, and one of the contributors at the conference said, and this hit me, because this is where it supposed to hit me from the context that we currently work in the AOD prevention addiction space, but was when everything is out of control, when your environment's chaotic, when your circumstances are just against you, when you seem to have no potential to act or take any jurisdictional leverage in your environment, it says one thing you always have control over is your breath, your breathing. That hit me. And when he said that at this conference, he said, and teaching particularly those going through withdrawal or having a moment prior to wanting to use because everything's chaotic and they just want to feel different to what they feel now, because again that emotional immaturity has been locked in. Usually they'd had their first substance use at 14, 15, so their emotional maturity is locked in at 14, 15. They had poor impulse control before that already, so it was all. But he said stop, and all of a sudden you've got control. You exercise control in that space, then all of a sudden all these other beneficial factors, which you're completely aware of, and we probably haven't got time to go into all of them today, but I do want to talk about that in the context of trauma. But it helps us just get that moment, as you said, that separation. I love that term you use, separation from the moment, how you feel, and what's going on around you. And that, so, yeah, look, so we'll probably we'll cycle back into this, but I wanted to talk about trauma because this is, I like the fact that, and I'm going to be very careful for those listening in, perhaps for the first time, trauma is a terrible thing. And in the last 5 to 6 years, it's kind of evolved. The whole trauma space has evolved, and a lot of trauma was ignored. The people that had, particularly ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are quite devastating. And we might talk about what they look like. There's 7 to 9 of those under 3 different genres. But neglect, abuse, and dysfunction are the 3 genres. Neglect, abuse, and dysfunction create trauma in a person's life, and that they have to manage that. But what's happened now, and as I said, it has become very, very subjective. And in a culture where, as you said, let's marry comfort, obsession, absolute obsession with, worship of, I'm going to use that term. And it's a very religious term, but the worship of comfort. It's this absolute need to have this in my life, and I will, spend all my resources making sure this happens. You marry that with a circumstance that, if you're in that obsessed place, you've got narcissistic tendencies, or you're emotionally immature, and those two things are disrupted by an event. Inconvenience can now be a trauma. It's like, that was traumatic because I didn't get to do what I wanted to do straight away because someone else interrupted me. Now, that's an extreme example, and I'm not here to, in any way, I want to labour this point, be pejorative about trauma. It's real, and people's experience of trauma is their experience, and we need to manage that. But I think that what's happened now is that there's been created kind of a space where there's almost a pandering to an undisciplined, a pandering to a immaturity, a pandering to a selfishness that is not trauma at all, that is not in any way trauma, but it's been packaged as such to create I would argue, in some of the places I'm dealing with, I deal a lot with people with genuine trauma. It's almost a pandering to people, so there's an industry sort of is starting to evolve around this, where people are, being, pandered to and told, given narratives to encompass their perhaps their lack of discipline and their whatever it is. But I like what you do is that you acknowledge that trauma is real, it's unique, it's subjective, but you also, as I said at the start of this, it's not about pandering to that. It's about helping equip people to transcend that, so that they can identify what are the real issues from what are the faux issues. They can find a way to develop their own sense of personhood and capacity to transcend those things that were once tripping them up and continually unraveling them, because you're actually confronting the fact that comfort is a problematic issue in their world. Tell us a bit more about your methodology in this space, dealing with trauma.
It's so ironic or interesting because I don't directly deal with trauma. It's a byproduct of just working consciously with someone and letting them guide their own journey. Because for me to claim that I'm a trauma expert, I'm by no means a trauma expert. However, it is interesting because it plays so much into someone's identity. Because someone's identity is made up by their beliefs and their memories, right? It's literally the memory of who they are, or who they think they are, more importantly.
Good.
And I do want to drill that in. It is who you think you are is what makes up your identity, either at a conscious level, unconscious level, at a subconscious level, right? So a lot of these things we can't actually access or touch, like, for example, your DNA, right, comes from your parents. So some of those things we can't actually access or change. But I guess what I'm saying is some of the memories or traumatic memories that we've had things that are keeping you stuck from actually progressing in your life and becoming the person you want to be, this is the space where I work, is helping people actually transform their lives. And there are so many different ways to do it, but the most simple way to do it is actually just taking action. And this is where it's so funny, because people just trip themselves up because they go back into that old belief system of, oh, I'm not good enough. The sabotage kicks in, and it's just this constant roadblocks and hurdles to get where they want to go. Because the one thing that is always changing is change. Change is inevitable. It's always happening.
Change is constant, yeah.
But when it comes to your identity, we believe in our minds that this is fixed. This is who I am. And so when you start ripping apart someone's psyche, it can be quite dangerous, but also liberating at the same time.
Absolutely.
And it's not to say that I'm ripping people's psyches apart either.
No.
I allow them the space to explore through their own understanding of who they are or who they think they are, to allow a path forward. And then it's just literally holding their hand through that process. Yeah. And when I say holding their hand, it's not holding their physical hand.
No, I understand.
But it's allowing them to realize and maybe step into their emotions a little bit, to let whatever is stopping them from accessing their heart and their mind, like properly in their gut and in their heart, because there's different brains we have in our bodies. It's not just our brain and our head, but there's like a heart brain and a gut brain, and these are all interlinked as well. So when you start looking at these things, it's just a matter of, what is it that you say that you want? What are you doing? What are you not doing? And just make one small promise to yourself today and keep it. Just keep it. Because that's where integrity is formed. Integrity is the thing that will change your identity the fastest. If you aren't aligning your words with your actions,
yep,
there's no way you're going to align your thoughts with those things either.
No, the Gestaltian principle of displacement therapy comes to mind. It's a borrowed from a theological framework, but basically, it is displacement. What you put down is important, but what you take up is more important than what you put down. And I think it was F.F. Bruce who once said, "When is a liar not a liar? When they stop lying, or when they start telling the truth? When is a thief not a thief? When they stop stealing, or when they start working for a living?" Now, again, this displacement mantra is it making a decision. I want to change. What are the mechanisms I need to change? And I think it was Viktor Frankl, when he was evolving, developing his logotherapy in Auschwitz. he was interested in watching people that he knew. Again, we talk about cognitive capacities, brilliant people, sophisticated people, well-heeled people, people of pedigree, and you had the poor, and you had the lower class, for want of a better word, all in these environments. And you watch their interactions and the unravelling, as no doubt an incredibly unimaginable environment would be. But one of the things he said about, we talk about identities. What makes a person a swine or a saint, his words, not mine, a swine or a saint is not conditions, but decisions. That is, and you can imagine, and we've talked about this with peer pressure with young people, it's like the peer pressure, it's like having a gun to your head. Well, there's no gun to your head, but that's what it feels like. So, well, how do I detune that imagery, detune that perceived threat, that I feel so compelled by this perceived pressure that I'm going to now make a decision that is completely unhelpful for myself and other people around me. And I'm going to follow, as you did with the drinking, let's go clubbing, let's just get drunk, and I'm going to just party. So what are the decision making? And this is where your journey is, holding hands. You're creating a model and a mentoring space that gives people another set of values and ideas to look at, so they can build their capacity building toolkit to make better, different choices. And if there are, and this is where this is where a lot of my listeners may part company. If there are not bad choices, then every choice is a good choice. But there are bad choices. You've experienced them. I've experienced them. Every family in the world who's had a drug-using person in there, they know what bad behaviour is. They know what bad conduct is. They know what bad decisions are, because the ripple effect is huge, and the psychosocial impact of poor choices, whether they're moral, ethical, doesn't matter, create all sorts of harm, unnecessary harm. And yes, I'm being deliberate there. And this is where identifying there is better practice, and there is best practice, and there is bad practice. And I think that's one of the things that's been taken off the table because of identity politics, is that we say, oh, well, we can't say anything's bad behaviour. Well, we don't have to say it's bad behaviour. We see the impact of it. And helping people discover best practice so they can become not just better for those around them, but better in themselves, but consequently those around them experience the benefits of that transformation. Because particularly spouses, when it comes to substance use, spouses, children, all their lives are better when dad, mum get off the gear, get away from alcohol. Life gets better. And that's just a clear, undeniable reality that a lot of the bad actors in the sector continue to try and bury. But the journey of that, the tools that you give your clients in building their health are really, really important in that space. Now, just on, before we finish up, this has been great, Shaun. I mean, it's good flowing conversation. But again, the trauma issues, you've, and I'm glad you've made that clear. You're not a trauma expert, nor am I. And I work with trauma experts, so I've been informed by some of them. But I've also seen, they're aware too of some of the failings in this area when we oversubscribe to new definitions of trauma that aren't actually helpful.
Yeah.
What a takeaway, besides the breath work, which is vital, and I do encourage people to look at Shaun and his breath workshops. Are very, very, very good. Very good tools, and a really good fundamental tool for physiology and psychology as well. But give us a takeaway for free, if I may.
Of course, yeah.
For our listeners, and it's something that can help them recalibrate if they're feeling that vulnerability, that sense of their low self-worth. I don't fit. I'm not sure where to go. What is a couple of things one thing you can share with us?
Probably the most simple one is people don't really care. What I mean by that is that you have the idea that you're going to be judged for maybe feeling vulnerable or saying something that, is really true to you, but might be rejected, or it might be judged, or it could be seen as, you're vulnerable in that identity that you hold about yourself. But the truth is, people don't really give a shit. They don't care. Like, they're too caught up thinking about what you're thinking about them. That is something that I heard a number of years ago, and every time that I bring that up, I'm like, holy shit, that is true. Yeah. They only care what's happening in their head and what you're thinking about them.
Yep.
That's what they truly care about. So it's very rare you'll find someone who's doing the work on themselves enough to realize that, or make a positive impact on someone else's life. It's quite rare to find those people, the ones who are self-aware enough to know what's happening and keep themselves away from their own crap to actually see what's happening for someone else.
Perfect. The others focused dynamic, and I think in our fundamental one of the basic underpinning principles of Western law is called the neighbour principle. Interestingly enough, it's the well-being of your neighbour has value and weight in your consideration of your journey of life. And when we're considering others, not for our own end, for what we can get from them, but how we can add value to them, all of a sudden we find value is added to us as well. It's a fascinating phenomenon to watch that. Shaun, look, we could again talk for hours, and some of the stuff I want to talk about trauma we didn't get into, but I'm really happy where we went today, and I really appreciate your insights, mate. Look, before we go, one last question. I ask about 98% of our guests this. Which one, the fence or the ambulance, or both? The fence at the top of the cliff or the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff of society? Which one do you think's the better option?
Great question. Probably the fence. I don't even know why.
Yeah, no. I think the conversation we've had and what's emanating from you and your journey is you want people to find what is good. You want to, it's not prevention in that sense of preventing them from doing things, but protecting them from bad practices, not bad environments, because that's the world we live in, but they can protect themselves from their environments and teaching them how to do that. I think prevention and fence building is always about protection. It's never about prevention in the sense of preventing you from going somewhere. And of course, a lot of people say, "Oh, yeah, the fence is up to keep me out." I said, "No, it's the fence is up to keep you from. The fence is there to keep you from the edge, to keep you from a very dangerous precipice that has a very, very rocky bottom that is not going to do you any good at all, and the unnecessary harm will happen when you go over the edge." So, but yeah, we do need ambulances at the bottom. We've had that from different people. We totally agree with that. But a fleet of ambulance at the bottom of the cliff is not a solution. It's at its very, very best is damage management, and at its very worst, it is a destructive palliative care model that has no regard for the human unit. But Shaun Tucker, thank you so much for being with us today, mate. It's been a pleasure. And for those who are listening, thanks for chiming in today and being part of the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Until next time, be resilient, be safe, be smart, and look out for someone else, not just yourself. Till then, bye.
Thank you so much. See yous.
As we wrap up today's session, remember, each step towards understanding is a step away from unnecessary harm. We're here to empower, inspire, and pave the way for optimal well-being. Stay resilient, stay informed, and continue being the change your community needs. Thank you for joining us at the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Until next time, take care and keep pushing forward.